News is biased and news is obsessed by framing. Media are obsessed by the framing of a story, the narrative. The narrative, in fact, has become more important than the facts themselves or events themselves, to the extent that the events can even be ignored if they don't fit the narrative. And I think that's become extremely obvious in this case and over the last 2 months of the Twitter files that a great independent journalist like Matt Taibbi has been involved in and has exposed. Despite these issues about whether he got the information from Elon Musk, he worked for a billionaire or whatever garbage theme and meme is being put out there by corporate media, the fact is, as a journalist, you or a researcher in any field, you just take whatever you can from any archive and you just deal with it and you put it out there. You don't make these judgments about how it's going to serve a certain interest and another interest, or how it wasn't a perfect archive that you had access to. You wish you had more information. You always wish you have more information. You just do what you can with what you have. Now, this isn't new. I've seen it before. Basically, it comes to the issue of angle and framing. News outlets decide what they consider to be running stories, and this involves implicitly a specific perspective on those stories. So, for example, when I was a correspondent for Reuters in Saudi Arabia, women was such a story. Their attire, their freedom of movement, their representation in institutional, family and other power structures. This was a Western framing emerging from this discourse of incomplete modernity in the birthplace of Islam, channeled through editors in New York and London into questions of women's rights in a particular location to the exclusion of others. For example, we didn't talk about India. As an individual journalist in a major media organization, it's virtually impossible to resist this kind of structuring of knowledge. Another good example is the Bahraini uprising of 2011. Try as you might to avoid describing the protesters as acting from a place of sectarian Shia bias, your editor would inevitably write that in. And your name's on the story. There's nothing you can do about it. So sometimes media will be more invested in the narrative itself than in the principle of free relaying of information about events. Another case is very interesting. Veterans of the bureaus or news agencies, say in Israel, they often come across as censors and framers first and foremost. The narrative for them is the most important, more than the facts themselves. Then reporters who went there and tried to challenge this by reporting simply facts, you always came up against a problem. The issue you realize is that the reporters there, especially the ones who are veterans, they essentially worked for the state. They worked for the state of Israel more than they did for the news outlet. That was more important for them. We see the same now. Media has been broken by Trump and by Brexit, and they cannot cover things fairly because to them the wider narrative is everything.